Hey there, it's Kat and this is Brews and Reviews. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about all the books that I read in May, and technically I'm filming this on the 31st of May, but I don't think I'm going to finish a book today, so hopefully there won't be anything missing from this wrap-up. But if there is, I'll just tag it onto next month's wrap-up and we'll be fine. It will be fine. I'm definitely not going to finish a book today, so I don't even know why I'm telling you this, but just in case. Just in case. So the first book that I read in May was Rebel Soul by Axio. This is a book that was described to me as Pacific Rim meets a K-drama. So I was very intrigued, specifically by the Pacific Rim part, because I thought, oh, giant robots doing the fighty fight with, you know, maybe monsters of some sort, that would be interesting. It wasn't particularly that. I think you would enjoy this book far more if you actually enjoy K-dramas and you watch K-dramas. I think part of the problem that I had with it was that I didn't watch any K-dramas before, so I'm not really in with the kind of tropes and the things that you would see. There was a lot of, like, I want to say insta-love, but like sort of teenage angst tropes that I would say is probably part of a K-drama, otherwise it was just part of the YA-ness of the book. So I'm thinking perhaps I wasn't exactly the target audience for this book. So I only gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I did enjoy it, but it just wasn't really for me. I think I definitely would have enjoyed more of the Pacific Rim part of it, because there were giant robots that did appear at some points in it. Just weren't quite enough of them for my taste, and there wasn't quite enough of the action part to balance out the romancy part. So it just didn't quite fit right for me, but I definitely think there's an audience out there that would really enjoy this. It's just not me. So yeah, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So the next 2 books that I read were Siege and Storm and Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. This is book 2 and book 3 in the Grisha series, and I really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed it. I actually found that I read these books this time with a new perspective, focusing more on like the darker side of Alina. I noticed that a lot more than I did in previous reads. And I was like, oh yeah, she just kind of want to be the villain a little bit at some points in time. So I found this really interesting. It was really fun, and I love the Darkling forever and for always. So yeah, that's not changed. I also read The Lives of Saints by Leigh Bardugo. I actually read this before I read Ruin and Rising and found that it was really interesting, and I noticed a lot more in Ruin and Rising in relation to the different saints that were mentioned. The Lives of Saints is basically about how a bunch of saints became saints, like the stories of their sainthood. It's kind of depressing, as are most tales of how saints became saints, because a lot of them end with their death and martyrdom. Very, you know, depressing. But it was interesting, and I did get a lot out of it, and I thought this was well worth reading. There's just a bunch of really short stories. They're only like a couple of pages each, but they're really interesting, so I enjoyed reading this one. I actually got something out of it, especially when I noticed it in Ruin and Rising. It also has Sancta Ilia in Chains, which is very relevant for Ruin and Rising. Probably the most relevant of all of the saints that are mentioned in Shadow and Bone. So that was really interesting to learn a little bit more about the folktale version of that. I think I give it 4 out of 5 stars just because there's not enough content to really be 5 out of 5 stars. I often have this problem with short stories. That's just how I rate short stories. Next up I read Hold Back the Tide by Melinda Salisbury. I read this with Kayla from Crack Into a Good Book, and this book was really good. It was really good. I had such a good time with it. This book takes place in Scotland beside a loch, and we couldn't exactly work out the timeline for it, but I want to say 1800s, around that time. Like maybe 1800s to 1850s. Because there were guns and a paper mill, I think it put it that specific period of time, but like history, my brain, ugh. So anyway, it's about a girl who lives by the side of the loch with her dad, and her dad is a murderer. He killed her mum years ago, and she is living with him. But just go into this book not knowing anything about it. I went into it knowing nothing, and it creeped me out. It's a horror book, and it creeped me out, and I had a nightmare. And I don't know if this is just because I was watching Resident Evil 8 playthroughs at the same time as I was reading this book, but I had a nightmare. And I'm like, how am I that freaked out by the things? I'm not going to spoil it. Just go into this book not having read anything about it, with just the very base synopsis, and expect to be a bit creeped out. It's fun, it's a good time. If you like horror, then it is a really fun one to read. And also there are some really nice descriptions of food that make you really hungry in it. Anyway, you should definitely pick that book up. Both Kayla and I really enjoyed it, and I think I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, because it was really good. Next up I read The Gutter Prayer by Gareth Hanrahan. This book takes place in a city called Gurdon, and it is effectively one of the only cities that is away from all of the god wars that are taking place. There is a huge amalgamation of religions and alchemists in this one city. I don't really want to say anything more about the plot because it's just very interesting to see it unfold, but I found that the creatures that were in this book were really fascinating. There are these creatures called the Crawling Ones that basically are made up of worms, and they feed on the dead bodies and they take a little bit of the person's soul, so you can live on if you feed your body to a crawling one. There are these things called tallow men, which are men made out of wax that are created by alchemists, and they're basically like police wax candle men. They're creepy, I like them. There are also ghouls and saints, and there is a plague that turns people to stone slowly, a bit at a time, and it's just really interesting. I had a lot of fun with this one. If you liked Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett, or if you liked, I don't know, if you like Brandon Sanderson but just like a bit darker, then maybe this. Pick this up. It was really fun, it was really interesting, and I really can't wait to read the next one of this. I think the third one is coming out later in June, I think. Don't quote me on that because I really don't know, but it's coming out soon and I'm very intrigued to read it. Next up we have a book that I've been putting off for such a long time, but now I've finally read. It's The Toll by Neil Shusterman. I finally finished the Side trilogy, yeah! Seriously, it took me way too long to read the series, and it's because it's chunky boy. I don't think this book needed to be as long as it was. Not going to give you a synopsis for it because this is the third book in the trilogy and I don't want to spoil anything. But I definitely think this book could have been 300 pages lighter than it actually was. I think that the beginning of this book, I want to say the beginning 300 pages of this book, were sort of narrated from afar. Kind of like a narrator that knows everything that's going to happen is like, just wait, you'll find out. I know all of the things that are going to happen and you'll get there. You'll realise what it is soon. And it was a little bit annoying to be, it was almost condescending in a way. And I was like, just give me some answers and give me some characters that I actually want to follow. When certain characters make a reappearance in this book, there's something to actually follow and get behind, and I think it moved a lot faster and was a lot better from that point in time. But yeah, I don't know. I liked where it ended. I can see why a lot of people don't like this book though, and I can see why a lot of people thought it was a letdown, because it's definitely not as good as the second book in the series, and it goes in a completely different direction than I was expecting it to go to. So it's, you know, it was good. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars in the end. I was expecting to give it less, but I did like the end. The beginning is a slog. The end is good, in my opinion. Yeah. Next up I read Magic Bites by Alona Andrew. This book is an urban fantasy set in a world where sometimes magic works and sometimes like science works, so like electricity and things like that, but they never work at the same time, and it sort of flickers in and out of both of those things. So you've got this really cool urban fantasy world, and there are different like shiftery type creatures and vampires and things like that. I really enjoyed it. It reminded me of like Female Dresden, but like a bit different. But I really enjoyed it, and I bought the next one because I definitely want to read it. So I could see me getting invested in this story. I liked the characters. I liked Kate as the main character. I think she was smart and funny, and she had a bit of a mouth on her, which is great because, you know, I like it when people say things they probably shouldn't say. So yeah, it was fun. So next up I read ThePlea by Steve Kavanagh. This is the second book in the Eddie Flynn series, and I really enjoyed it. It was so engrossing. I don't know what it is about this series that makes me really like legal thrillers, because it was something that I wasn't particularly into, but the way that Eddie argues cases, that there really shouldn't be a way to argue out of, is so fascinating to me, and I really think it's very interestingly done, and I just find these really absorbing, and I read it in one sitting because I couldn't put it down and I just wanted to know what was going to happen. So yeah, it was really great. I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then we have Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lynn. So this book was described to me as Mulan meets a weaving competition, and I'm all here for that. Love Mulan, love competition books. Yes, please. It's an Asian-inspired fantasy world, and I was very intrigued about what was going to happen. Now, while I was reading this book, for the first half of it, for the actual main competition part of it, I rated it 3 out of 5 stars, and I thought, this is interesting, but yeah, it's not like super investing. Once that ended, things changed. I read the rest of the book in one sitting and rated it 5 out of 5 stars. I did not expect to rate it 5 out of 5 stars, but I really fell for the main character's love interest. I just really liked how their banter turned into sort of more, and it was really interesting, and I really liked the sort of lore and the mythology behind it all. It was really good. I really ended up enjoying it. I had to buy the next book immediately because I really want to know what's going to happen. And turns out they've redesigned the covers, and this cover is so hard to find in the sequel. I did end up finding it, but I had to search for quite a while to actually get it, which is a shame because I think these covers are gorgeous. The new covers are also gorgeous, but I want a matching set. Anyway, this book, really great. I was surprised how much I liked it because I'd read Reflection by Elizabeth Lim, and I thought that was like, but I think that might have been more to do with the publication being a Disney publication and this being her own book. I really enjoyed it, really enjoyed her writing, got very invested, and I need to know what happens next. And the last book that I read this month was A Killer's Mind by Mike O'Mare. So this is kind of a dual timeline serial killer thriller. That rhymed. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it rhymed, so we're going with it. So the main character in this book is a civilian criminal profiler who is working alongside the FBI and the police on a case where women are being found embalmed and posed rather strangely in places. And I don't want to say anything more about what else is going on. I really enjoyed it. I thought there were some very interesting things that happened. I also really liked the main character. Now, she does some questionable things. She's not a perfect main character by any means. As I was reading this book, I started to think that the main character is coded as autistic. It's never mentioned that she is autistic. She completely might not be. I think she is neurodiverse in some way, and criminal profiling is a special interest of hers. It makes a lot of sense from the perspective of a neurodiverse person. From the reviews I read, a lot of people didn't really understand the main character and thought she was a little bit boring, but I was like, oh no, these seem like really normal things, so maybe this person is autistic coded, maybe she's not. I related to the main character and I really liked it. I want to read more about it. I will say that the climax of this book was a little off to me. I thought it was a little bit weird. Just like some of the things that some of the characters do, I'm like, wait, no, you wouldn't do that. That's a bad idea. That's a bad idea. Don't do that. I did end up giving it 4 out of 5 stars, but I did really enjoy it. Again, I read this one in one sitting. It seems to be a theme this month, is just reading things in one sitting because I don't want to put them down. Really enjoyed it anyway. 4 out of 5 stars. So those are all the books that I read in May. Hopefully all the books that I read in May, unless I finish something tonight, which I'm definitely not going to do, so I don't know why I keep bringing that up, but like, who knows. So excluding rereads, I think the best book that I read this month was Hold Back the Tide by Melinda Salisbury, and the worst book that I read this month was probably Rebel Soul, because I think that was the only one I gave 3 out of 5 stars. So I had 1 3-star, 6 4 stars, and 4 5 stars this month. So I think that was a pretty good reading month, especially as a lot of the books that I read were books that I've been putting off for a long time, so I'm very pleased with this month. If you like this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!